So, my name is Gabriel Walters, and this is my tic-tac-toe walkthrough tutorial, I guess. All right, so this is my main activity. This is where the game ultimately opens up. So I have a bunch of buttons that I set up for being able to choose the different types of difficulties and show my credits. So here's my credits. And each one I have set where, so the different types of difficulties, so if it's player versus player, that's PvP. I have intents that I'm passing those modes and the difficulty levels. If it's easy, and it's player versus computer, then I'm passing, that easy mode or the easy difficulty, and then the player versus computer mode. Same for PVC. I did try to actually do for medium, was trying to institute that, and I'll explain what I was trying to do. It's not operational yet. I'm still going to keep working on it though. Player versus computer hard. This is where I use the Minimax function, and then computer versus computer just to actually test out that it's working. So once it does that, once I make a button click, it's going to pass it to the game class, which is going to give the different activities. So these are all enumerated for the different options that they select. Here is where I have the XO views. This is from the handout for getting the different child surface views, so that they'll be able to be touched or worked with in the game class. I had a lot of issues getting that initially set up, even though I was copying the code exactly right. For whatever reason, it wasn't working, and in my layout files kept saying that there was issues, or that it was saying that there was one or more classes that weren't initiating. So I ultimately ended up going to buttons and then figured out what the issue was, and then came back to it and I got it working. What it was passing to the game over screen, and I didn't have that completely set up yet, so I couldn't figure out why the screen kept going white. Here is my on create, where I'm ultimately setting up the view and then initializing or declaring the M player turn label. I did have set up for M is player X, and I had that flopping back and forth. I couldn't get some of the views to look right for a while, so I switched to a turn counter. Thought that it would kind of optimize it, since you don't really need to check for win until you're at turn 5, and you don't really need to check for a draw until you're at turn 9. So I was doing that, but I ended up having to go back to it because it was making it hard to implement the Minimax function. So here's where I actually get the intents from the main activity class. Here's where I set up the board. I set it up like this instead of doing the for loop, so that I could actually change initial game states, so I could check the Minimax function. Here's my brute force check win. So if M is player X, or if it's turn is 5 or greater, then it's going to go through these two options. Basically, I made player X 1 and O -1. So if it goes through and it finds, it's doing the diagonal. So there's 8 choices. It's doing the diagonals, and then it does the rows, and then it does the columns. So if it finds any one of those, it's going to spit back a win. If it doesn't, then it's checking for O. If that doesn't come back, then it's going to make sure that there is no empty spaces or no zeros in the board. If there is no zeros in the board, then it spits out a draw. Otherwise, we're still playing. So that's why it's to be determined. The end turn function, this basically what this is doing is this is getting passed back information from the XO view after either the computer does the select function or the player is actually performing an on-touch action. So it will take that value. I actually have a function that I set up to freeze the screens, freeze the individual child views, because it kept giving me issues where if I was clicking it, it kept clicking more than once, and changing the choice. So I made it so you can't re-click. It'll check the win if it's anything other than we're still playing. It's freezing all of the child views, and then it's passing the results to the game over screen. If it is to be determined, then I'm flopping the M as player X. This is where I still have the turn count. It's not really attached to anything anymore, but I can still kind of track it and see where we're at. And then I changed the turn labels, which is right here, and that's what I was saying when you're looking at the game. Like if I was doing player versus player, first player is X, so he goes. I need it to actually switch, not continue to say X's turn. So I had to have it say O's turn. So I have it flopping. That's why I have the order when it's appearing, so that it's actually switching. Now there is something that I noticed, and I'm not sure why, but it's on all of them. If I'm playing, and let's say that I'm doing for X to win, if I click here, instead of it giving me an X tile, it will throw the O tile, but it's still going to give the correct status that X wins. So there was the O tile, but it's showing that X wins. If I do it for O, it throws the X tile, but O still wins. Here is the computer turn, which is part of the async task, and I'll get into that. Let me jump over to the XO view. So, all right, here's the XO view. Here is my stop click function. So basically, it's false until the function's run, and then it becomes true, and that's what freezes the screens. Here is where I use the tiles from the drawable folder. I got those from kenny.nl. They're free open licenses to use them for any type of project. It's a pretty good resource. The background is actually just a green cup background from TopTall, and also can be used free of charge. So once I set up my XO views, then when on-touch happens, so this is part of the on-click, so when on-touch happens, I freeze the screen, and then I get the dimensions, and then I go to draw. Here's draw, where I am drawing the X tile or the O tile. When I first did it, it kept flopping back and forth, so I end up throwing an extra X tile in so it would draw it right the first time. And then once that gets done, it unlocks in post, and then I'm passing information back to end turn. So if it's X's turn, it's going to pass a 1. If it's O's turn, it's going to pass a -1 to the to right here. So it's going to assign that to the M game board, and then check the win status. Here is where I have the computer doing its selection. So it's almost exactly like on touch. I still have to freeze the screens. It's going to establish, the canvas is going to lock it, and then it's going to call the draw function, and then it's going to pass the same information back. The game, depending on the choice that you pick, it's going to, when it's doing computer turns. So if it is computer versus computer or player versus computer, then it's going to go through, and I have it set up where X, the human player is always X, but it's going to go through, and I have a switch set up, so it's going to do the easy mode. It's just picking a random value. So this is what it looks like. It's really easy to beat. There's no AI or anything in it. It's just picking a random value. Medium is not working how I wanted it. Basically, I'm setting up each individual cell of the board. I'm checking that if there are the opponent, so X, if X is it has 2 in the row, 2 in the column, or 2 in the diagonal, then it's going, and this one's empty, then it's going to put it there, and it's going through each one of the cells, and if not, then it's picking up a random value. And it doesn't really work exactly how I want, because sometimes it just kind of hangs and doesn't actually make a selection. If I make a selection, sometimes it'll kick over. So there's that. Hard is where I implemented the Minimax function. So I'm actually making a clone of the current game board, and then I'm using mPlayer. So I'm making mPlayer as either 1 or -1, depending on if M is player X. So O would actually be -1, and then it's getting passed into the Minimax function that I'm using to calculate. So this is my Minimax function, which is actually, I'm checking for terminal states first. So I'm running through the check win for the current state. If it comes back as a win, then it's going to, win for X, O, or draw. Then it's basically, it's not going to go through the Minimax. It's just stopping right there. If it's to be determined, then I am checking all the positions in the board for an empty position, and then assigning that the mPlayer value, and then recursing through the Minimax. And this is where I have it, where it's flipping back and forth between the max and min function, which I have here. So this is where I have it actually flopping back and forth to look for either the max score or the min score, and then spit out based on the best score. Then it's going to end up spitting out the best move location, and put that on the on post execute. So I've rebuilt this numerous times. This is an example of where I built it again. When I play it, it's not recursing right. So if I make a choice, it is selecting, but it's not it's still acting stupid. It's not being accurate. It's very easy to beat. It tends to want to go in a couple of the same positions. So it does kind of look for a win, but not very hard. The function itself, I've been actually looking through a lot of the logcat and putting logs in there to try to find what's going on. It is changing the values and getting the best score between the two, but I'm not sure exactly why it is not really checking for the best move. It should be looking for, like if I go in a corner, the smartest place for it to be should be in the center, and it's not doing the center, it's picking another corner. If I have 2 in a row, it should be blocking me, and it's not really blocking me. So after all that's done, it gets passed to the game over screen. This is what the game over screen looks like. I'm basically pulling the intents from the end turn, and then spitting out who won, giving the results, and then I provide a button to click and start the main activity again, so that you'd be able to play again. as for this assignment, I really did like this assignment. It was very, very challenging. I would like to figure out the issues that I had, but I'm still going to continue working on it, and I'm getting better as I'm doing it. So this is my video. Thank you.